Today I want to show you what I think is the best Sicilian for new players. The Sicilian's a really exciting opening. You imbalance the game immediately, but a lot of the more popular variations are quite tricky and hard to learn. So I want to show you a variation that works really well at a beginning level, and it's very easy to learn. So the Sicilian starts with e4 and of course c5. Compared to e5, we immediately break the symmetry, and that's going to lead to an exciting game. White usually plays knight f3. Of course, there's a lot of other moves, but I just want to focus on the most common stuff today. And the variation I'm going to recommend starts with e6. One nice thing about this move is at the lower rating levels, you often see players playing bishop c4 against the Sicilian, and can be tricky if you face an early attack on f7. That's the weakest square in the starting position. It's only defended by your king, but if you've got that e6 pawn already there blocking it, it's going to be very hard for white to get at that. So white usually plays d4, and we take, and knight takes d4, and we are going to immediately attack the center with knight f6, threatening this pawn. And white should play knight c3. They might play e5, but this is a trap. You can think about what you would do for black here. And the best move is queen a5 check. White has to get out of check. Next move, we take the free pawn. And the reason, by the way, that I am in lead chess right now is to use this opening explorer so we can see the population statistics at different levels. So right now I've got selected Rapid and Blitz, and the 14 to 1600 rating tiers. So the lead chess ratings are on a bit of a different scale than chess.com. This is comparable to maybe 1200 chess.com Rapid, something like that. But we can see how often people do stuff, and this trap with e5, they're actually falling for 11% of the time, so you might catch someone with that. But let's continue with knight c3. And then the final move to sort of enter the variation that I like here is knight c6, and this is called the 4-Knight Sicilian for obvious reasons. The 4 knights are on the board. So what do I like about this at the beginner level? Well, it's extremely intuitive play following opening principles. You're developing the knights to their natural squares. You're playing in the center. Compared to something like the Najdorf, where you play this early a6 pawn, that's a bit weirder. I mean, the Najdorf is a good opening. It does work if you know what you're doing. But I find it's much easier to play openings where you play natural developing moves than openings where you have to remember weird moves in very specific orders. So we're putting some pressure on white center here. And against most moves, we're looking to play bishop b4, pinning this knight, and then challenge the center with d5. So again, very intuitive play. Not a lot of weird stuff you have to remember here. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to look at the top responses by white in terms of what is played most often at this level. These are not the most challenging moves necessarily, according to Grandmaster theory, but I want to focus on what you'll actually face, and that's sort of another reason to play this opening, is that the ways for white to play that are considered most challenging for this setup are not obvious or intuitive, and your opponents for the most part are not going to do them. So let's look at the top move, bishop g5. White pins our knight, but this is also a little bit risky for white because this bishop is kind of exposed and it's leaving the queen side a little bit loose. So we're going to continue with our plan and bishop b4 and pin white. And now, as you can see, they usually play knight takes c6. If they don't, we're ready to play h6 next move, and then either we force white to trade off that bishop and break the pin, or if they go back, we would even be ready to play g5 and knight takes e4 utilizing this pin. But they usually take. We are going to recapture towards the center with the b pawn, which is how we're going to recapture pretty much every time. And then e5 is the most common. So you can see that white is trying to use this pin to win our knight, but we've got a really nice move here. Queen a5, stepping out of the pin, pressuring this knight, hitting the pawn, and also pinning it. So we're This move's doing a lot of stuff. We're attacking a lot of white's pieces, and usually they take. There's not really a better move for white. So we lost that knight, but we're going to get this bishop back. And after another pawn trade, material is still equal. That was actually a big trade, but it's one that favors us a lot because we've got the bishop here. Our dark squared bishop is combining with the queen to put a lot of pressure here. And also notice that white lost both of their center pawns, whereas we still have ours. So we are also going to play d5 and use our advantage in center pawns to exert a lot of control over the center. Black is much better in this position because of the bishop here and the central control. What else do they do? Bishop e3, also very common. This is a good move against the dragon, against the Najdorf, against many Sicilians. Bishop e3 is good. Against the four knights, it's not that good because it sort of just plays right into our plan. Bishop b4, and we are ready to take this pawn. So most common move for white, f3, and this actually makes d5 even more powerful because white has kind of loosened up all these squares around their king. And we are again threatening to take on e4. The most common move is knight takes, pawn takes, and e5, so white tries to keep the center closed. But we can just drop back, hitting that e5 pawn, and after f4 castles, we have this really nice solid pawn center. Next we can go c5, threatening d4. We can put our rook on the b file, looking at this b2 pawn. At some point we can do f6, challenging white center. Black is also better here. And if e takes d5, then just knight takes, hitting this and this. White center's under a lot of pressure. All right, what else is there? Third most common move. These three moves, bishop g5, bishop e3, and knight takes c6, are the most common, so those are the ones we'll cover. Knight takes c6, same recapture, b takes c6. Generally, you want to recapture towards the center. This is setting up d5. So a few moves for white here. Bishop g5, we would play bishop b4. That would transpose to the same position we covered for bishop g5 on move 6. We've already seen that. If bishop d3, we can just play d5 here and set up this nice pawn center and play bishop e7, castles, maybe rook b8, or sometimes you can even think about a5, bishop a6 to trade off that bishop. This really nice pawn center gives us a good position. And then if e5, we can just go knight d5. And here you can see by far the most common move is knight takes d5. According to the theory, knight e4 is the most challenging. But again, that almost never happens. Maybe I'll do another video where I cover the more theoretical lines. But to start with, I think you should focus on the lines you'll actually see the vast majority of the time. So knight takes, pawn takes. Again, we're left with an awesome pawn center. And if you're worried about this doubled pawn, whenever you want, you could trade that off with d6, but we don't even necessarily want to do that because it's actually white's pawn on e5 that's weak. And let me just show you one more move, bishop d3. There's many decent moves for black here, but a nice little resource to be aware of. The only problem in our position at the moment really is this bishop, which is having a bit of a hard time to find a good square because it's on the same color as all our pawns. But you can actually resolve this problem right away with bishop a6, which appears to hang a bishop, but we have a trick set up for this. If takes, queen a5 check, and no matter how white blocks, queen takes a6, so we traded off our bad bishop. We still have our good bishop, we still have the center. We have some nice files to potentially use for our rooks. So again, a very nice position for black. So, okay, that is the 4 Knights Sicilian. We covered the most common tries for white. As we saw, black is getting a good position against all of them, using pretty much mostly the same ideas that are quite easy to remember. So give that a shot. I think that's the best Sicilian when you're starting out. It's easy to play. It scores really well in the stats. Natural, intuitive play. I think it's going to work really well for you.